So, welcome everyone to our webinar today, which is all about how to engage and support your students along their data jam journey. My name is Ashley Allred, and I'm the Education Program Leader at Cary Institute of Ecosystem Studies in Millbrook, New York. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Cary, we are an independent nonprofit center for environmental research. And our staff are global experts in the ecology of cities, disease, forests, and fresh water. Our education team uses the local environment as a classroom, and we take advantage of our campus as well as schoolyards and watersheds in the Hudson Valley region to increase local students' ecosystem literacy in a fun and engaging way. For those who are new to Data Jam, the Hudson Data Jam competition is a competition where students choose an ecological data set that has been collected by expert scientists here locally in the Hudson Valley. And then the students find patterns in the data and come up with a creative way to communicate their findings with an audience who might not know about the local ecosystem here. And the competition is open to middle school students, high school students, and we have a family data jam that provides opportunity for increased involvement from parents, as well as opportunity for elementary students to participate. This is our second webinar in a series of 7 in an effort to support distance learning during this year of extended time away from school and in school. And we hope you'll consider joining us for the remainder of our webinars. Our next webinars next week feature practice with graphing, doing basic graphs and simple analyses. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our guest speaker today, Karen Bodner. Karen has been teaching for almost 20 years, and she currently works at Irvington Union Free School District in Westchester, New York, where she teaches several courses at the middle school, including Regents Earth Science and Energy and the Environment. And this is her 3rd year participating in the Hudson Data Jam competition. So Karen, you can take it away.
All right, well, I'm really happy to be presenting, and how to engage and support students, I think right now is key and is extremely difficult for a lot of teachers. I know it's really difficult for me. So I'm hoping that what I've experienced the last few years, people can take away and do whatever they want with to help maybe engage and spark some interest for your students. So I just want to give you a little idea of what I'm experiencing right now. I have been back physically to school since September, and we have students coming in as an A cohort and a B cohort. So when our A cohort comes in, we have about half the students physically in school and half the students at home, and we're simultaneously teaching both. So it is really difficult to try to engage the students in the classroom while you're also trying to engage the students that are at home and remote. Wednesdays we're all remote, but then come Thursday, Friday for the B cohort, the same thing. The other half comes in physically and the others are home. So that's definitely been a challenge to engage the ones, like I said, in the class as well as the ones at home. So I'm going to try to give whatever I can provide to help encourage students and excite students about the Hudson Data Jam. And this is my 3rd year, so I'm really excited to participate once again. Oh, and I did have some winners, by the way. I think they 2nd place, maybe? I don't recall. So in years past, I used to start with an environmental project, and I used the Lorax. So I used the Dr. Seuss book, and we would actually read the Dr. Seuss book, and we would pull apart the text and try to understand the ideas that Dr. Seuss was trying to present in a way that was enjoyable for kids. So I just have the quote from the Lorax, I speak for the trees have no tongues. And one of the ideas of the Hudson Data Jam is you have this data and you need to speak for it. How are you going to tell the story of the data that you're obtaining and analyzing? So like I said, in years past, I have used the Lorax. It was a nice, basically anticipatory set and a way to engage the students in a different way instead of just giving them data or giving them a specific topic to look at. I let them read the book, like I said, interpret different components of the book, and then from there they chose an environmental project that they were interested in. So I do things a little differently now, but I still do like that method, and based on some of the classes that I teach, sometimes that approach is a little bit better to utilize that as an introduction instead of some of the other things that I do. So typically, I've already introduced climate to my students at this point before we start with working with the Hudson Data Jam. One of the movies that I like to show is Polar Extremes. It is quite a long movie. It's about 2 hours, and I did show it right before our February break. We're on break this week, and it was long, and it's a great piece of information for science data collection and what's going on in our world, but it was very long. 2 hours is a little too much, and I teach middle school students. They weren't as engaged as I would like them to be. And remember, some are in school and some are home. So basically, I linked here, and I'll share the slideshow with everyone, but I linked here just a small component, a short clip from the movie that I thought would be better. So I have that here, and I think next year I will only show that. I think that's maybe 10 minutes or so. Then after I have that little intro, we also start to talk about glaciers and oceans and geomorphology. And I have a Google form that I present to the students that talks a little bit about carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. This is when we're discussing greenhouse gases. There's a video associated with this. I did also attach, Ashley, the PDF version if people can't access the Google form. And then I also, trying to engage them, again, remember, I tried the Lorax book one time. I did Polar Extremes this go round. And I do also like to show Chasing Ice, and this I'll show in its entirety. But I have attached discussion guides for middle school students. And it's a great movie. It's a documentary about a National Geographic photographer that goes around, and you can actually see the ice changing from year to year based on all this information that he's collecting. So it's a very powerful visual for students. And again, depending on the students and depending on how you're trying to engage, I'm trying all these different avenues. You know, I'm trying books, I'm trying movies, any way that I can try to get them interested in our topics. So for the Data Jam, I try to include the parents. So, and this letter would be available as well if anyone wants to use it. But I do try to include the parents, you know, dear parents, what we're working on. I have the Institute linked the parent consent form that's required to be part of the Data Jam. So what I do is the Data Jam is an assignment. It's a project. And again, every year I try to have an environmental project for the students. So it's a project, it's an assignment, but then if they would like to, they participate in the Hudson Data Jam. So I don't force any of the students to do this. This is their choice, but they are all working with the data. And, you know, it's really important, especially with the next generation science standards, to really look at authentic data and analyze and interpret and model and try to understand what's going on with all of the data. So I have that letter that's available. Okay. And then, again, I'm just giving you what I've done. I also, last year, used QFT, the question formulation technique. I would have the students in groups, and they would be given images, again, a visual, something to spark their interest. And they would have poster paper, you know, they would start working through this question formulation technique, and it would go quite well. This year, I can't do that because of the way that the students are organized. So what I was thinking, and again, I haven't done this, my goal is March 8th and 9th, So for this year, for the question formulation technique, I'm not sure if people are familiar with Jamboard. I know some of you are using Google, and our school is Google. So these are the images that I would have given to the students if they were in groups. And again, that's not working. So I decided to put those images into Jamboard. I only have 3 here right now. And I give them like a guiding idea, look at the image, human activity and development impact natural systems in the environment. Then what they do, your questions should all relate to the study of the environment. A lot of my students, when I've done this in the past, they weren't really focused on what I was looking for, so I had to give them a little more of a guide. And all they would do is if people aren't familiar with Jamboard, you can actually add a little sticky note to it. So I'm just going to say hi for right now. And what the students can do, I was hoping to engage them together. Now, remember, I do have the students physically in class, so they can log on, or I might have them verbally discuss things, possibly write things down in groups, but again, separated from each other. So the students are able to jot down their questions, and as they go through the question formulation technique, they can differentiate between the open-ended and the closed, and really come up and focus on a good question that they came together as a group. So like I said, I embedded 3 different pictures. And so I would break them up into groups, and each group would have a different image that they would go through. And then we would have a discussion. So everybody could see the visuals, everyone could see questions. Because again, it's really focused on the students and the direction and the thinking process that they have, and not mine. So I give them prompts, but I'm trying to focus them, but not truly tell them what to do. I really want them to explore on their own. Then again, we dealt with the Lorax one year. I'm showing some movies. We're looking at some visuals. I really like using the Ray Bradbury short story. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it. I'm a big sci-fi fan. So A Sound of Thunder is a Ray Bradbury short story. It's not so short, but it's a short story. And I assign it to the students because I really like to make a connection with text and literacy and reading. I think it's really important. And it's for middle school students, they really like it. They get annoyed that, I have to read text, this is an ELA. But once they understand it's sci-fi and it's kind of cool, what happens in the story, just the quick premise behind it, if you don't know what it is, they go back in time and someone steps on a butterfly. And because of the damage to the butterfly, it impacts the future. So what we start to discuss is how one small thing changes so much. Sometimes this brings up the butterfly effect and some other things that students like to talk about, but the whole idea of the science fiction and wow, like could these types of things happen? Also, it's the message. With the Lorax that I used, there was a message behind it, speaking for the trees have no tongues. And the Ray Bradbury story, there's a message. And again, the whole idea of the Hudson Data Jam is the data. How are you going to relay the message to people about that data? So I'm trying to show them different approaches to get to their own message and their own product when they're what they're working on. I've attached the parent consent form, and I'm showing you a lot of things very quickly, but for the parent consent form, we also use Cami, which I'm not sure if people are familiar with, but with Cami, parents, if they're savvy enough, they can actually sign the paperwork. The students on a PDF, they can oh my goodness, they can do so many things. They can create triangles, they can create text box right on the doc. Oops, I'm gonna say hello again. You can erase. This is the signature. Here's my signature I already generated, so I can just paste that wherever. So this is really nice. And what I have students deal with, maybe with topography or whatever it was in the past, they would then submit it on Classroom. So it was really nice. A lot of my students, they ran out of printer ink, or they don't have paper, whatever's going on, so they can't print it and take a picture and then submit it. So it's nice to be able to access something that they can write on. I also encourage the students to have a mouse because it's just easier in order to manipulate a lot of these different platforms that we use. So the parent consent form, that's with the Hudson Data Jam, and that's due April 16th, right, Ashley? And then I've also attached videos that is on the Hudson Data Jam's website. So I try to have the students prompted with those as well. I have a link to the data set that the students would be using. And again, my goal, I don't know if it's going to happen, but my goal is for March 11th, 12th, and 15th to start. So to be determined. When we go back, you know, some chasing ice, we have another project we're working on, the QFT. So there's a lot to try to get to March 11th. So to be determined. Then I've also attached a data process, and this, oh yeah, am I just
sorry to interrupt. I see there's a question in the chat.
Oh, and sure.
Did you pick one data set for all to work on?
No. I'm all about student choice. Nope, absolutely not. And there's different levels to the data that's available, which is really nice. So some students that are a little higher level can choose something that's more difficult. Some students only choose one data set. Some students choose 2 or 3, you know, to have the data talk to each other. So no. For my projects, I like the students to choose their partners, and they can only choose that student once. So if we've had a project already, and we have had a few projects, so if they've chosen that partner, they can't choose that partner again, but they still can choose another partner. And then as far as the data set, no, they can choose whatever they want. And then I help to guide them. Usually they choose a lot of the same stuff, but no, it's totally student choice. I think it's really important because I think that engages them more than me telling them what to do. You know, and this year it's all about engaging and trying to motivate. So I don't want to deter them from that. So for the data process, I don't want to take full 100% credit for this, right, Ashley? One workshop I went to for the Carey Institute, they presented something similar to this. So I just morphed it a little bit. And I attach, once again, those videos that I want the students to watch so they can see different messages that are already out there that other students in other schools worked through. They would identify who their teammates are. Are they going to work by themselves? Are they working in a group of 2 or 3? I really try to not have more than 3 because then it gets a little complicated, especially this year. I've attached the data sets. And then just the first step of looking at the data, there's so much. It becomes very overwhelming and you kind of get lost in the data. So all I have the students do at first is to look through the data, and before they're graphing and before they're doing things, I just want them to look at, what do you know about your data? Just basic. What questions do you have? Like, what's sparking a curiosity? I don't understand what this means. Well, I don't know, what's this variable? I don't even know what this measurement is. And what questions, once again, does your data inspire? So, you know, for example, I'm trying to think. Ashley, do you remember like the eel? I'm trying to think of some of the data off the top of my head.
Well, there's for example, a zebra mussel data set. And so you have like all this information on the population of zebra mussels, but then you have data on the population numbers for other species, like different like plankton or like other like rotifers and things like that. So you can kind of see, you know, how things are fluctuating in these populations.
So perhaps a question that a student might have is something about an invasive species, or how that species is impacting others. So what are they starting to see? So again, just very, very brief. I'm not stressing them out. And especially this year, I'm not stressing. Then I want them to just sketch a quick idea of how they might, I guess, analyze and put together their data. I use Google Sheets with my students, so they can generate, you know, perhaps a bar graph. Maybe they're going to deal with a line graph, multiple line graph. pie chart, whatever it might be, just a quick sketch, and try to determine, what they're going to put on their axes. And again, these might be some of the questions that they come up with. I don't even understand what some of the variables are, or again, the units of measurement. They explore their data. We're focused on our claim, evidence, and reasoning. And in Irvington, we really try to embed the claim, evidence, and reasoning from 6th grade on. So by the time they see me in 8th, they're pretty comfortable with this. Then I try to have them work in other groups. So if 2 students are working together, I would like them to speak to a totally different group, to go through, what are you seeing? What is your claim, evidence, and reasoning? Just to really, again, discuss. So they're choosing their data set, they're working together, but then they're also going outside that group to other groups. And then just to draw a simple model of what they might have as their product or their message. Is it going to be a comic book? Is it going to be a video? Is it going to be a song? They can do so many infographic, whatever they want to do. But again, basic. So that's the data process. And then again, they take this data, and the idea is, how are you going to tell that data's story? So I really want them to be creative. The only thing is, this does get a little overwhelming. It looks a little scary, but it's not. This is the report that the students would generate for the Carey Institute when they're part of this Hudson Data Jam competition. So again, it's a project that I do with my students. So all the students have to work on this report. And then they put all this work into the report. Why not submit it to the competition? That's an incentive too, because they win prizes. This year, it's virtual. So dependent upon where you are in, the Hudson Valley, you don't have to travel this year, which is nice. So let's see, title, intro, that's all here. I think I linked the report that's on the Carey's website. And then I was speaking to Ashley about this. I do a lot of scaffolding September. I am very into the students graphing through Google Sheets versus on paper. They'll start with paper, but I do want them to work with Google Sheets. I was saying to Ashley that I do love this Tuva, but it's very, it's a little, I'm sorry, there's some weird noise in my house. I'm not sure what's going on, if it's a child or what. But the Tuva is great. It's very visual for students and really puts this data together for them. Do you want to talk a little bit about Tuva? Do you want me to go to the site?
Yeah, you can go to the site real quick. Yeah, Tuva is this cool website where we were able to input all of the data sets that we have available for Data Jam. And essentially, if you want to just click on one
of the data sets?
Yeah, one of the data sets. It'll open up, first it'll give you a background. So this is the background information sheet that you would also find on our website, which is nice. And it tells you the variables that are available. And then it gives you a place to graph your data. And so along the left side, you can actually just interact with it directly and drag and drop variables to the X and Y axis. So for example, I
don't use it. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. You can, so if you drag the year, go click on year.
Oh, I click on the year.
And drag it to the X axis.
Did it work?
I think you have to go all the way in the box. There you go. And then
voila.
Yeah, and then you can drag like number of farms in New York to the Y.
Ooh.
And it's pretty cool. And the thing is, you can manipulate the data. Students can play around with putting things on the X versus Y axis. They can look at different types of graphs like line and bar graphs. And there's also an option to do like basic statistical analyses too. So it's kind of nice for students who might not have a lot of experience with graphing, to get a place to really be able to work with it and manipulate it. And we will be exploring Tuva a little bit more at our webinar next Thursday, our Diving into Data Part 2 webinar. So if you're interested, you should come check that out.
So I think it's great and I would totally be using it, but I'm really trying to challenge my students. So I make them generate their own Google Sheets. That's kind of my little, not a pet peeve, but it's something that I really want the students to learn to use. And then there are data trends, comparisons, data interpretation, questions that they might come up with. So this is all part of that report. And then their final product or this message that they want to generate from the data set that they've chosen. So they can, again, create a video. I had mentioned infographic, poem, song, cartoon, comic strip, children's book. There's so many different things. I also linked some sample projects that are on the Carey Institute's website for the Hudson Data Jam. There's a little bit more to the report, some explanation and reflection and references. I believe only 2 references are required for the competition, but I have the students find 3 references, 3 sources, and it's a high school course that I typically present this project to. So I request APA format instead of MLA, which I know is usually for ELA in middle school. I also, once again, linked the final report that's part of the competition. There's a Google form this year, and I think last year, for submission and some info for submission, how you would label the project that you want to submit. And then, so what I'm going to try to do this year, in years past, we do a lot of gallery walks where students, they have their projects around the room and other students walk around and they check out their projects. There is a feedback form that I have the students use, and it's been on a Google form. This year, I was going to try something a little different. First of all, it has to be virtual, so there's no walking around. And the Google form, it was helpful, but I'm going to try something a little bit different. So I was going to use Padlet, and I've used Padlet before for a couple other projects, and it seems to have gone pretty well. So what the students are going to do for me, and again, everything that they're doing for me, they can submit to this competition, which is great. They're going to put their final project, their final message onto Padlet. And then they'll use that as the platform to walk around virtually, and they can comment on each other's projects. Then what they'll do, there's a Google form where there's a personal reflection, how they reflect upon the feedback that the other students have given to them. And I had mentioned scaffolding. We try to talk about feedback, September, October, so they become comfortable with this. But for Padlet, I have the directions that they would upload their projects. They would, again, walk around the room, the Padlet, and they would give a compliment, what I like, what I wonder, and one suggestion. So then when the student deals with the personal reflection, they look at this information, and we try to talk about warm and cool feedback. I want to just see if I can show you. Here's my data jam. We're doing a photo gallery project, and we did actually just work on a hiking trail project, but I have the students' names on there, so I can't really show that to you. But I did work with SELF over the summer. There was a workshop that I was part of, and that's what they did. We had to design projects, and we uploaded them onto Padlet, and then we walked around and added comments. So there's a way where you can add a comment to that particular project. So then students can see what the feedback is right away. The Google form was great, but then I have to take and populate all those comments and share those comments with the students. So that took a little while. So a project would be labeled, Karen Bodner's project was 1. So then the student would go to the Google form and choose project 1 and then answer those questions, the compliment you know, what I like, what I wonder. And again, it just took a while. So I'm hoping I'm thinking this is going to work out this year. Again, I've done it before for another project, but I just presented the project on Padlet, and then I had the students work with the Google form. This time, projects are going to be on Padlet and the feedback is going to be on Padlet. So we'll see how that goes. And then the virtual award ceremony is May 21st. I just posted some important pieces and documents for the data jam, the guidebook, that parent consent form. So my students don't have to fill out the parent consent form unless they want to. But again, they're doing all this work. And I'm trying to have that as a motivation to join the competition. You know, I'm hoping that's a segue. The judging rubric, again, that report form, the data sets, the student planning sheet, there's so much available on the Carey's website.